This episode of Southeast Iowa Today is brought to you by Greiner Auto Body of Washington, Iowa, using state-of-the-art techniques and decades of experience to get your car back on the road after an accident. Car Doctor of Washington, Iowa. It doesn't matter who Frankensteined it, they can fix and clean and customize it. McDonald Boneyard of Keota, Iowa, for all of your farm equipment and auto recycling needs. For great food, it's your choice. Your Choice Family Restaurant of Wayland, Iowa. Open Tuesday through Sunday. Check out their Facebook page for new hours and menu items. Girling Repair of Winfield, Iowa. If your mower is dead, call Fred, your Husqvarna, Aaron's, and Gravely dealer. Fred also fixes and sells snow blowers. B&B Propane and the family of jet stops. Save 15 cents per gallon with the BP app at all locations. CW Tree Trimming LLC. We're into your trees, not your wallet. Serving all of Henry County and the surrounding area, and we offer a senior citizen and veterans discount. Iowa Technology Systems delivers expert IT management that keeps your business running by ensuring your systems stay online and secure. Visit iowatechsys.com. They all present the award-winning Southeast Iowa Today. Here's the author of Christie's Journey, The Beat Goes On, and your host, me, John Bain. As most of you regular podcast audience members already know, I'm a resident of Eldridge, Iowa. On June 30th, 2026, I received 2 letters in one envelope from the Eldridge, Iowa Fire Department inviting me to come to this meeting for the public. Now it's July 1st, 2026, and I'm out front of the Eldridge Fire Department ready to attend this meeting conducted by the Eldridge Fire Department, where they have invited residents to hear the future of fire protection and medical services in Eldridge. I'll take you inside for the meeting. I've got a lot of questions myself. If other residents don't ask, I'll do my best to do so. Also, on this episode of Podcast Excellence, I'll share the individual letter from Eldridge Volunteer Fire Department Chief Keith Schneckloth leading up to this meeting, as well as the letter from the members of the Eldridge Volunteer Fire Company. Remember, 2 letters, 1 envelope. As promised, here are the 2 letters that the residents of Eldridge, Iowa, including me, received from the Fire Chief and the Fire Company. First, I'll share the letter from the Eldridge Volunteer Fire Department Chief Keith Schneckloth. It's now on your screen, and you can follow along. Dear friends and neighbors, for many months I have remained largely silent regarding my termination from the city of Eldridge. I chose that path as I believed the truth would eventually become clear on its own. However, given my long-standing commitment to both our community and our fire department, I believe residents and business leaders deserve to hear directly from me. For more than 11 years, I proudly served as a City of Eldridge employee, and for the past 23 years as a volunteer for our Eldridge Volunteer Fire Department. During that time, I dedicated countless hours not only as a city employee and president of the Eldridge, Iowa Employees Association, but also as fire chief and a volunteer firefighter. My focus was always the same: serving the citizens, protecting our community, and ensuring the Eldridge Volunteer Fire Department had the resources necessary to serve residents safely and effectively. The issue that ultimately led to my termination began with an $86.68 purchase for the tire pressure sensors for our fire department command vehicle. The charge was mistakenly billed to city account instead of being charged to our fire department. Once the error was identified and brought to my attention, it was acknowledged and intended to be corrected. What could have been handled as a routine accounting adjustment instead became the subject of a formal investigation by city administration and legal counsel. As the investigation expanded, additional purchases and coding questions were examined. Some items involved I had personally paid for. Others involved coding errors that had no impact on city funds. Ultimately, the only transaction involving city tax dollars was the $86.68 purchase of tire pressure sensors for a fire department vehicle. Despite the absence of any allegation that I personally profited from or intentionally misused city funds, the process ultimately resulted in my placement on administrative leave and my termination based on what the city administration described as a, quote, loss of trust, unquote. While there are additional details surrounding the city's decision to terminate my employment, what concerns me most is not what happened to me, but what it says about the willingness of city leadership to address difficult issues facing our community. For more than 2 decades, I have dedicated myself to serving the residents of Eldridge. Throughout that time, I have consistently put the interests of our community, our firefighters, and public safety first. I remain proud of that record. Residents and business leaders are entitled to reach their own conclusions regarding my termination. However, I encourage you to look beyond the headlines, ask questions, and examine the facts for yourself. Because the larger issue facing our community is not my employment status. The larger issue is the future of fire and emergency medical services in Eldridge. For years, firefighters have raised concerns regarding staffing, equipment replacement, volunteer recruitment, facility needs, and long-term sustainability. These concerns existed long before my termination as a city employee and continue today. Ignoring those challenges does not make them disappear. Today, the Eldridge Volunteer Fire Department continues to operate as an independent, nonprofit 501c3 organization with a limited number of active volunteers. Like volunteer departments across Iowa, recruitment remains difficult. Call volumes continue to increase, and the demands placed on firefighters continue to grow. The department has repeatedly identified these challenges and presented solutions to city leaders. Firefighters have volunteered thousands of hours serving this community, responding to emergencies at all hours, attending training, maintaining equipment, and planning for the future. Yet many of the concerns they have raised remain unresolved. The firefighters of Eldridge voted unanimously to remain an independent fire department as they believe it is the best way to preserve the level of service our residents deserve. They have presented a plan. They have identified our needs. They have demonstrated a willingness to work towards solutions. The question now is whether city leadership will demonstrate the same commitment. If funding challenges continue unresolved, if critical equipment purchases are delayed, or if additional volunteers are lost because concerns are not addressed, the consequences will not be felt in City Hall. They will be felt by the residents and businesses who depend on firefighters and EMS personnel to arrive when seconds matter. Public safety should never become secondary to politics, personalities, or disagreements. The residents of Eldridge deserve honest conversations, transparent decision-making, and a long-term commitment to maintaining the quality fire and EMS services they have come to expect. I am not asking you to support me personally. I am asking you to support your firefighters, the men and women who have made an extraordinary commitment to serve this community when you need them most. Ask questions. Make your voice heard. The future of fire protection and emergency medical services in Eldridge belongs to all of us. I would like residents and business leaders to know that this letter pertaining to my termination and my opinions regarding the future of our fire department was paid for personally by me. No Eldridge Volunteer Fire Department funds, taxpayer dollars, grant funds, or department resources were used to tell my story. The opinions expressed in this letter are my own and are offered in the interest of transparency, accountability, and informed community discussion. Respectfully, Keith Schneckloth, Fire Chief, Eldridge Volunteer Fire Department. And now, the letter from the members of the Eldridge Volunteer Fire Company, and it's up here right now on the screen for you to follow along as well. And it reads, a message from the Eldridge Volunteer Fire Department. The future of fire protection and emergency medical services in Eldridge extends far beyond any one person, personal matter, or individual disagreement. It is about ensuring the long-term stability, effectiveness, and sustainability of the emergency services that protect our community every day. It is about whether our community will continue to have a strong, locally controlled fire department capable of protecting residents, businesses, schools, and families for years to come. Recently, the membership of the Eldridge Volunteer Fire Department voted unanimously to remain an independent organization. Following that vote, the department formally submitted a proposal to the Eldridge City Council outlining the funding necessary to sustain emergency services, maintain equipment, support volunteer recruitment and retention, and prepare for the future. The proposal was not created to expand services or build unnecessary programs. It was developed to address the realities facing modern fire departments and to ensure that Eldridge residents continue receiving the level of protection they expect and deserve. The proposal identified several critical needs: funding for staffing and operational support, facility improvements necessary to support volunteer recruitment and retention, replacement of aging apparatus and emergency equipment, long-term financial stability for the department. Unfortunately, despite ongoing discussions, the department has yet to receive a commitment from city leadership to move forward with an adequate funding plan. The lack of progress has created significant uncertainty about the future of fire and EMS protection in Eldridge. This uncertainty carries real consequences. Volunteer firefighters serve because they care about their community. They spend countless hours training, responding to emergencies, maintaining equipment, and sacrificing time with their families. However, volunteers also need confidence that their efforts are supported and that the organization they serve has a sustainable future. Many members have expressed concern about what may happen if the department's future remains unresolved. Some volunteers have indicated they would leave the organization if the city were to absorb the department of fundamentally altering its structure. The loss of experienced firefighters would create immediate operational challenges and require significant investment to replace the knowledge, training, and service those volunteers provide. Residents should understand what is at stake. A volunteer firefighter cannot be replaced overnight. A fire truck cannot be purchased overnight. A department's experience, training, and community relationships cannot be rebuilt overnight. If volunteer numbers continue to decline and funding needs remain unaddressed, the result could be reduced response capabilities, increased reliance on outside departments, higher long-term costs, and a diminished level of local fire and EMS protection. The very people affected would be the residents who depend on emergency services when seconds matter most. The firefighters of the Eldridge Volunteer Fire Department remain committed to serving this community. We are not asking residents to choose sides. We are asking residents to become informed and engaged. We encourage every resident to attend city council meetings, contact elected officials, ask questions about the future of fire and EMS protection in Eldridge, request information regarding the department's funding proposal, voice support for maintaining strong local emergency services. The future of the Eldridge Volunteer Fire Department should not be decided without the input of the people it serves. This community built this department. This community relies on this department. And this community deserves a voice in its future. Respectfully, the members of the Eldridge Volunteer Fire Company. Well, there you have it. You are up to speed. Next, I'll take you to the public meeting at the firehouse, as well as my exclusive interview with Chief Keith Schneckloth right after this obscene profit center timeout. Pfeiffer Sawmill, your local home for kiln-dried lumber and affordable trailer decking to your specifications, all in Rome, Iowa, serving Mount Pleasant and all surrounding areas. Do you like to throw a hatchet? They've got your board. Call Ben today at 319-931-4544. Sanity. It comes in handy when you need it, and Sanity Coffee House will serve it up through coffee and pastry like God intended. If the beans were any fresher, you'd smack them. Sanity is home of the Mad Cow and Caramel Knowledge. Low on energy? Try their Lotus drinks. Special frappes and iced coffees await. Hungry? Go for a whole hog or a porcalypse, and a mac and cheese wrap will satisfy. Always high-speed Wi-Fi, so pull in and get your Sanity at 104 South Iris Street, Mount Pleasant, Iowa.
All right, good evening. I just want to welcome everybody. Appreciate you all coming out. We wanted to extend this open invitation to all of our citizens and community to come out and find out more information about where we're at, what's going on, and maybe we can help answer some questions and explain some stuff. Just most people know, I am Keith Schneckloth. I am the fire chief here. I've been with this department for 23 years and served as a chief for a little over 8 now. I want to introduce the individuals that you see in the blue shirts, because they're not going to be speaking in the back. These are our members. These are the 25 individuals that volunteer their time to serve this community, both in the fire and EMS response agencies, or response roles. So we are going to have our discussion teams up here. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. We'll start over here.
Dave Engler, I'm assistant chief, I've been here 30 years.
Tim Martinek, I've been around 14 years and captain and treasurer.
Okay.
Pat Gainer, I've been with the department for 19 years and I'm a captain.
Peter Doyle, I'm a firefighter EMT and on the transition committee, and I've been on for 3 years.
I'm Brian Yonke, one of the lieutenants, and I am also the secretary. I've been on the department for 4 years.
Kind of the format what we're going to do here is we are going to kick off with a slide presentation. Our secretary, Brian Yonke, is going to kind of narrate most of that. We will be adding things in as we go or whatever. If you have questions about each individual slide, feel free to ask those questions during the presentation. We'd be happy to address those and discuss those as they go along. Or if you have comments or something like you'd like to share, that's more than welcome as well. Keep in mind that if you have a question that we haven't talked about yet, it may be coming up in a later slide. So if you hold that thought until we get to that slide, we will have a spot at the end. We'll answer any questions that anybody has. So I'm going to turn it over to Brian to kick this off.
Okay, thanks, Chief. All right, so we've all seen a lot of press here recently. There's been some social media postings, things like that. So we kind of want to back up and start from the beginning and talk through what are the needs? What are the needs of the department? What are the trends we're seeing? And why are we trying to move in the direction we're trying to move? So what's the need, right? We put together a graph, and this is a summary of the last 10 years for our jurisdiction. In the green, you see number of calls, and that's on the left axis. And in the orange, you see the number of active members on the department. And the concerning trend, which is a trend that we see in a lot of volunteer departments in a lot of areas around the country, not just in the state of Iowa or our specific area, is that those two lines are diverging. So we're increasing our number of calls and we're decreasing our number of volunteers. So that's an alarming trend for us, for sure. So we're working on trying to take measures to help offset that, increase the number of members, and make sure we can still provide the coverage that's required in our area. So another quick graph here shows population growth in the city of Eldridge. In blue, and in the green, you see the same trend line that we saw on the last slide. That's the number of calls. So you see population is steadily increasing. number of calls is actually increasing at a faster rate than the population. So did some quick numbers on the start of this 10 years ago, and the number of calls per citizen was 0.07. The number of calls per citizen now is 0.11. So basically 1.5 times. What does that mean? It means if our population goes up by 20%, our calls go up by 30%. So they're, again, diverging lines. It's a concern for us to make sure we've got the coverage that we need in the district. So one of the questions that was thrown out there in some previous discussions is, how does one full-time person help? Right? We're talking about burnout, we're talking about calls increasing at an alarming rate. So how does hiring just one person help our department? And there's a few ways that it helps, right? One is that this person is on staff during the day and can help schedule shifts. So we can schedule nighttime shifts, we can schedule daytime shifts, and make sure that we've got the right number of people at the station to cover the calls that are expected. So that person can focus on that. Today we don't have that capability. We sign up as we are able to cover night shifts. We don't have anybody that schedules day shifts. It's people in town that can cover while they're here. This person's going to be at the station all day long, so the intent is that they're here to cover calls. Right? If calls come in during the day when many of our volunteers are working outside of city limits and somewhere else, this person's going to be here to make sure that they can field a call. They're going to complete administrative work. So this is a burden on many of the volunteers today. We've got reports that we've got to audit, we've got reports that need to be filed, we've got compliance that needs to be taken care of and administrative. So those are all things that this full-time person would do. The full-time chief would handle a lot of that administrative work that currently the officer team is doing, the business officer team is completing. They're going to complete or coordinate station and apparatus maintenance. So right now that's a fill in where you can, right? If we've got a truck that goes down, needs to go to an outside shop for maintenance, somebody's got to take time off of work, take time out of their schedule to get it there, to pick it up, all those sort of things. The intent is this person would either perform that maintenance here in-house or be able to take those apparatus out to get them fixed as needed. And supplemental funding. So grant applications, community outreach, that is a portion of our budget. And we'll talk about that in a little while here. It's not something we can count on all the time, but it is something that Chief Schneckloth has done really well at over the past several years of applying for grants, exploring what's out there, and making sure we can get as much of that sort of funding as possible. So what's the impact, right? What is the impact on the city? What's the impact on our district? What's the impact on you as homeowners, as citizens of the city? To start with, let's talk a little bit about some of the negotiation insights. So over the last year and a half, we've been talking with the city, and we've heard a lot of things. We've had a lot of discussions. We've pitched out a lot of ideas and concepts and all those sort of things. But a few things stick out that are concerning to us. These are comments that we heard throughout some of that negotiation process. A question that was thrown out during one of the discussions was, what are other communities doing to reduce their budgets or meet lower financial needs? Well, they're selling assets, right? Do we really need a tower? Do we need a ladder truck out there? Do we need all the assets that we have? Do we need all the equipment we have? Do we need all the capabilities we have? Well, other departments are selling those assets. Maybe we should consider that. They cut services, right? For us, a big thing is EMS. That's the bulk of our calls that we go on a given day, a week, or month. So there's been comments about, well, what if we cut services, right? Do we have to do everything that we're doing? So these are all things that impact you. And we'll talk a little bit about the apparatus next when we talk about insurance. Another comment that we heard, and we'll see this as we get through the financial slides, is, hey, we're willing to commit to the county tax levy. And that's it. That's where we're gonna cap it. So what happens then, right? You'll see the operating budget, the proposal for capping, the proposal for the county tax levy is not enough for our operating budget. So then what happens? Well, we've got to come back every year and ask for more money, right? Here was our operating expenses. Here's our capital expense needs. Come back on an annual basis and essentially have to beg for money, right? So those are all things that are concerning to us and things that maybe shifted the tone a little bit in our discussions with the city. Okay, so we talked about apparatus, and well, what if we just sell our tower, right? There's towers nearby, they can mutual aid in, right? This is a summary that's gonna kind of talk through, what does this all have to do with me, right? I'm a homeowner in town as well. Why do I care about this? Why do I care if you sell a ladder truck, right? Hopefully my house doesn't start on fire and you don't need it, right? What if I sell that? Okay, so ISO rating. ISO stands for the Insurance Services Office. Insurance Services Office reviews our capability to provide fire protection services for the town, for your homes. What they do is they classify our capabilities, and there's a lot of things that go into that ISO rating, which we'll talk through here in a minute. The City of Eldridge and Eldridge Volunteer Fire Company together are an ISO Class 4, which is a very good rating for a volunteer organization. They rate us on a scale from 1 to 10. 1 is the best, 10 is the worst, essentially saying you have no fire protection if you're ISO Class 4. So we are an ISO Class 4. Okay, so what does that mean? What goes into the ISO rating? 50% of that rating is based on the fire department. And that includes staffing levels. So, when you hear about volunteer attrition and people saying, hey, I don't have time for this anymore, or I'm not gonna put up with this anymore, that's a concern, right? We start to lose staffing, we lose our capability to respond to calls. And the staffing metric in ISO rating is the number of people that respond to calls. So how many people show up on average when there is an issue at the station? Firefighter training. How are we staying sharp on our skills? How often are we training? What are we doing for skills? Are we covering the breadth of skills that are needed for adequate fire protection? So they audit all of our training logs, the number of hours that we train in a given year, we document all that, we provide that. It's part of the administrative work we talked about before. What fire apparatus do we have in the station? You walk past some of it outside, you walk past some of it in here. We talk a little bit about tower, but what if we just sell tower, right? All those apparatus put together are what give us the capability to respond to a wide variety of calls, different structures we have in town and in our jurisdiction. So they rate us based on our apparatus and capability there. Maintenance, how well are we taking care of our equipment, right? Is it all up to date? Is it passing certification? Are our hoses tested to make sure they're gonna perform when we need them? All of those things go into that maintenance category. And then location, so where is the station? Where's your house relative to the station? How much coverage do we have? How long does it take us to get to an incident, if there is one in town? All that stuff gets put together, that's 50% of the rating. 40%, I believe, is the water supply in town, which we've got adequate supply, hydrants in the proper locations. So all that goes to your ISO rating. That gets provided to all of your insurance providers. So when the ISO rating changes, your insurance provider gets a notification and then they change your premiums. So what does that mean? Our ISO rating goes down, your rates likely go up, okay? So we did a quick case study, and I'll put an asterisk on it to say this estimate's generated by Google AI. They just typed in the parameters to say, I have a $400,000 house in Eldridge, Iowa. My ISO rating goes from 4 to a 5, what happens, right? So let's assume that some of these statements are true and apparatus gets sold, the tower gets sold to meet budget needs for a short amount of time, and our volunteer numbers drop. People are fed up with some of the situation and they just decide they're out, right? So volunteer numbers drop, we sell an apparatus, our ISO rating drops from 4 to a 5. Your home insurance premium increases by $100 to $250 a year. That's an estimate, of course, right? Your plans are gonna vary, your home value is different, all those things. But just to give you a flavor of why does this matter, right? It matters behind the scenes. The capabilities that this department has matters not only in life-saving efforts if you have an emergency, but behind the scenes to your pocketbook. Any comments on that ISO rating or questions? No, that's not something that gets talked about very often, and it is kind of behind the scenes. To be quite honest, 2 years ago, before I started getting involved in any of this, I had no idea what this was, right? So
These ISO ratings also affect your businesses in your community as well. So it isn't just a residential, it does affect the businesses. We couldn't put a number to that. We did try to reach out to several different insurance providers to see if they could do that, and they were not comfortable or able to do that. So as we look at not only residential growth, we also look at business growth, industry here. It is a very big important factor to those potential businesses come into this community.
Yeah.
Should be noted that the highest ISO rating a volunteer department can get is probably around 3.
Yep. Yeah, I did some research on that, and a lot of that has to do with staffing and response to calls ability by the department. So, yeah, 4 is a very good rating for the volunteer department. Okay, so now we kind of understand why this matters. Let's talk a little bit about operating budget. So there's been some significant changes in the amount of money that's been asked for by the department. Where's all that coming from? What does it all mean? So we put together a summary of a couple of things. We're going to start just with operating budget. So what do we mean by operating? That's all the things that basically keep the station moving and shaking, right? It's the electricity to keep the lights on. It's the fuel in the trucks. It's repair on hoses. It's repair on equipment. It's all those sort of things. Okay? It's paid by call stipend to maintain volunteer membership. All those sort of things. So there's a breakdown by year of our department, and you'll see LeClaire on there. So LeClaire graciously sat down with us, went through their entire operating budget to just kind of give us a grounding of where are we at relative to where they're at, especially as we move from all volunteer to a hybrid, one full-time person supplemented by volunteers. So you can kind of see that. You'll see the categories up there. We'll dive into some of the details on what the changes are in these. The thing I'll point out with these numbers is the blue and the purple. So the salary and benefits is the blue. That's what we're paying today, our volunteers in call stipends and things like that, our officer team. And the purple is facility equipment operations. Again, that's a lot of the items I just described: fuel, electricity, maintenance, those sort of things. So the blue and the purple for all of these bars is somewhere between 80 and 90% of our budget in any given year. And that's why we're going to focus the most on those. Certainly there are other categories: public relations and fire prevention, community outreach type stuff. There's training, certification, association dues that all the members have. There's facility insurance for the building and the apparatus, those sort of things. Building and maintenance you see in orange. There's admin expense, so that'll become more important as we hire a full-time person. Those expenses go up, right? We've got to have some HR services, we've got to have administration of pay, so payroll type stuff, all those sort of things. So we'll see those kind of increase a little bit. And the blue and the purple here. So the total is in the top. You can kind of see that over the next several years. Yeah, please.
So what category would your replacement of equipment, where would that be budgeted?
Great question. Great question. So I'll ask you to hold that just for a few slides. We're going to just talk operating, and then we'll get to the capital expense. But that's where that is. So apparatus replacement, significant capital expense for the upstairs finishing, and we'll talk about why that's important as well. But yep, you'll see that in the future slides. Okay, so 25 to 26, where we're at today versus where we're proposing to be next year. There's a huge change here, right? And there's been some talk on various forums about, yeah, that's a significant increase, where's all that money going? So to hire a full-time person takes a fair bit of money, right? Between a salary and the benefits, including insurance, workers' comp, all the federal stipends, that kind of stuff, all comes out of it. So the difference between $78,000 and $271,000 is broken down in that box in the bottom. So the proposal for a full-time chief is $108,000 base salary, which is very close to the full-time police chief in town. His is $111,000, published in the paper this week. The $31,000 insurance stipend, or health insurance for this person, and retirement stipend. Workers' comp, $39,000, and then FICA is around $8,000. So the full-time chief is $186,000, roughly $187,000 increase between where we're at now, where we're proposing to be. And then the paid by call increases because we continue to see call volumes increase. So our volunteers' pay goes up slightly, plus the federal stipends that come out of that. So the total increase you see between 25 and 26 proposed is $192,800, $193,000. And that's for that full-time support. Okay, so other things change too, right? Facility and equipment operations go up by $88,000. So what's all included in that increase? So there's operating cost changes, a Lucas device, which if you're not familiar is a device that performs CPR on patients for cardiac arrest. So volunteers don't necessarily have to do it the whole time. If you've ever done CPR, you know it's quite exhausting. This helps provide high quality CPR for our patients while they're in transit and while we're getting them ready to go to the hospital. New turnout gear is being purchased. That's all for expired gear, and volunteers here, new volunteers that are joining, is $53,000. And then we recently purchased some pediatric EMS equipment to the tune of about $3,000. So all that sums up to $88,000. You see the bulk of that increase is turnout gear. So we've got a fair bit of gear that's reaching the end of its life and has to be replaced for the safety of our members. 27, we see some additional expected expenses. So we need to do some hose replacement, large diameter hose. That's the big yellow supply hose that hooks up to the hydrant. We've got some of that failed already last year, and we anticipate we're going to replace a pretty significant amount of that in 2027. Additional new turnout gear for new members plus expired gear is coming to end of life, and then our plan is to replace the jaws of life in our rescue equipment, rescue truck. So that's the maintained high rate of facility equipment operations that you see in purple between those 2 years. Okay, so now you see another change between 26 and 27 in the salary and benefit changes. So what's going on there? Remember the trend of calls versus volunteers and the divergence of those trends? Based on where we're at and volunteers responding to calls, our belief is that we're going to need another contract resource, another full-time resource here during the days in 2027. So that added cost is $70,000 for an added contract resource, plus their workers' comp, $27,000. That's just under $100,000, $97,000. And then the plan for 27 is to institute a paid on shift structure. So what does that mean? You heard me talk about some capital expense and finishing the upstairs. Some of the benchmarking that we've done with other local departments, they have finished living quarters and they've provided a place for volunteers to stay during the day and during the night shift. Why is that important? So one of our limitations today is volunteers have to be close enough to the station to respond in a timely fashion. We've had people that live in Davenport, we've had people that live in Bettendorf, we've had people that live in other towns approach us and say, hey, I'd like to volunteer with you guys. I want the experience, I want to serve the community. We have to turn them away because we have no place for them to stay while they're here. So one of our goals is to finish the upstairs, to provide that living quarter for people to be on shift here during the day and during the night. And our expectation is that will increase the volunteers coming in. The departments we've benchmarked have said they've essentially doubled the number of volunteers that they have by doing that. Claire went from 17 active volunteers to 32 when they instituted living quarters and did the paid on call structure. Okay, so that's why that's important. And the plan for 27 would be to have that living quarters upstairs, bolster our volunteerism, and then go to a paid on shift structure. With that comes additional expense, right? Because people don't want to just sit here all day for free. They could be doing something else. They want the experience for sure, but we have to pay them to be here on shift. So that's another $52,000. So that's the difference between the 26 and the 27 in the salary and benefits category. Questions on that one? Okay, so here's where the rubber kind of meets the road. This is the proposed funding that the city has put forth through our negotiations. And when I said before the statements of, well, we'll just cap it at the county tax levy, this is what it means. So the city tax funds that they've proposed at that county level are $304,000. Mid-American Gas franchise, which the city has been giving us for the last 5 years?
Splitting it between the police department and fire department.
Splitting it between the police and fire department for the last 5 years amounts to roughly $60,000. And the county tax funds we get from benefited Fire District 3 amount to $62,000. So you add all that up, that's a proposed budget of $426,000. The red line on there indicates where that lands relative to just our operating budget. That doesn't include anything for capital expenses. It doesn't include any capability to fill out the upstairs. That's all the money just to keep the lights on. So that's the gap we've heard. There's been comments about, we were in negotiations, we were only $85,000 apart. We were $85,000 apart on running a sustainable business. I know there's plenty of business owners in the audience here. I don't think any of you would sign up to say, yep, year one, let's run it at $85,000 loss, right? It's not sustainable. It's not fair to the citizens of Eldridge to try and cut services here and there to make that work. So this is the implication of locking the budget in and essentially funding at the $426,000. So the gap for 2027 is obviously higher than that, about $245,000, and there was, I think, a small increase proposed year over year, 2% or something like that. So, okay, questions on the operating budget? Yeah, please.
In comparison to the 2026 Leclerc versus the 2026 Eldridge, how many people are they serving?
Good question. I'm not sure if I know population, Chief, maybe you know, or Andrew.
I just looked it up. It's 4,700. For 2026 in Eldridge, you guys are serving 7,005 people, and you guys are still under Leclerc's budget.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. We've seen that similar trend in call volume. Right? I'm not trying to disparage Leclerc. They do a fantastic job. They provide an excellent service. But
When you break
supporting
down
your comments.
budget, yeah, we're
Yeah.
almost double with less budget.
Yeah, they're running less calls, serving less population with more budget than what we're proposing for 2026. Yeah, please.
So in terms of your revenue, are you an independent fire district in Iowa? Do you get I forgot to check my tax bill. Do you get a separate line item on our tax bill where those tax dollars go directly to you, under your control?
So the way to answer that is that the rural area we serve, which, Brian, if you go to the breakdown of 62,000 for the fire district, you'll see the county, where it says county tax funds.
Yeah.
So outside of the city limits, we have the benefited fire district freely we serve. Scott County directly levies those properties at the 60.75 cents per $1,000 assessed value. So those people that live in that rural area have a specific line item that says fire district number 3 on it. If you live within the city limits, you do not have that line item. That protection is built into the general obligation tax levy that the city charges. So this year, I believe, it was $8.11 per thousand. That's built into that $8.11. And then they take that general obligation dollars that they receive and they distribute it in their budget as they decide their own format.
So they control how much you get for the residents living within the
That's
city
correct.
of Eldridge.
That's correct. Which is not up there specifically. The proposed is at $304,000, but currently the city's paying the fire department on a quarterly basis a total of $169,000 per year. And that dollar figure's been that way since 2014, 15, 14 or 15.
So is that revenue structure similar to what Leclerc has, where?
Exactly the same, except for Leclerc is a city-owned department. So versus we're not a city-owned department, they're a city-owned department.
Okay.
Good question. Okay, so let's throw in there the capital expense. That was a question that was asked earlier. Oh, yeah, please.
How many businesses do you guys serve compared to Leclerc? I don't know if you know it or not, but I know you guys have quite a few manufacturer businesses here, other businesses, you have the YMCA, compared to, I don't know if that goes into the structure of how many calls you guys go into compared to them, and how many people work there, and same with fire suppression systems that you guys have in town compared to other places.
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. I'll let you.
I can't answer the exact number, the number of businesses we serve. As you know, everybody that's here as a citizen knows, all the businesses we have. We do respond to a lot of facilities as far as businesses,
Same as,
functionalities, stuff like that,
retirement
yes.
homes.
Yeah, Grand Haven, we respond to calls there. So yes, we I can't give you a percentage as to how many calls are businesses versus residential off the top of my head. We could definitely research that number and provide it. Yes.
So, when you respond to a call, especially like if it's an EMS call, do residents get a bill to cover some of the costs of your services?
No, we don't bill anybody. So two factors to that. Number one, they're providing the tax dollars for the service through their property taxes. So kind of a hindrance there. And I'm not sure of any departments within Scott County that bill residents for emergency medical calls. I know there is some structures about reoccurring calls, number of calls, or like false alarm calls. But the other side of that is that it just adds to that load, that burden load that we're talking about. So we're already talking about reporting and auditing. So if we have to go through now and start figuring out how we're going to bill a resident and then follow through with that on the HR side, accounting side, all that, it just adds more workload. And rightfully, if we don't get that collected, are we going to go out and send somebody to collect it? Are we going to send all the paperwork? It just, again, compounds the workload.
Is that the same for businesses too? If you had to go and make calls there?
Yep. The only time we charge for anything is if we respond to a hazmat call. We do charge for those supplies. So the example being is if we were to have a semi that were to tip over on 61 and leak diesel fuel, we expel specific items that we carry on our truck for our hazmat operations level, that we collect that stuff and contain it to keep it from dissipating or dispersing in the soil. We then bill that person for that, as well as we bill them for the response to that truck for that specific hazmat call.
Great question. Okay, so let's throw capital in the mix here. Right? That's the other big spend category that you've heard a bunch about in the media outlets and whatever else. So we've added that in here as a dark green bar for the 3 future years, the 26, 27, 28, and we put that in there as $200,000. The reason for doing that is to ensure that we have stable capital funds for future purchases, for station upgrades. We talked through that, finishing a living quarters upstairs to help bolster our volunteer capabilities. And the other piece of that is to plan for future replacement of the apparatus that you guys saw sitting outside. So there are a couple of our rigs that are getting up there in age. Rescue Squad 3, the truck that will take on motor vehicle accidents, things like that, rescue operations, is getting pretty long in the tooth. That's probably the next one that's going to get replaced. We'll talk costs on some of those things here in a future slide, just to get a feel for how much those things cost to replace. They're a significant expense, as is the upstairs. So a little more talk on funding. The red line you see on the right for the future years that we just talked through, that's the $426,000 that the city has proposed to fund us. There's also been questions about, well, what have you guys gotten funded in the past? So a little bit of that is an apples to oranges comparison, but the breakdown is up there. So Chief mentioned the $169,000. That's basically been our frozen payment from the city for the last 15 years.
Say 10, we say.
Yep, 10 years is what they've been paying us with no increase, aside from the Mid-American franchise that we split with the police department, and then county tax funds are basically the same based on that county tax levy. So you see the total budget that we're operating on, or we're operating under for 2025 is $292,000. Okay, when you add up all those expenses, including capital spend, we'll talk through what that is here in a moment. But you add all that, the expenses up, we spent $285,900. So that gives us a surplus from this last year of $6,000. $6,000 doesn't go very far in the fire service. Okay? A set of turnout gear is somewhere between $5,000 and $6,000. So that's the surplus we ended up with for this last year. You notice a roughly $90,000 capital expense for 2025. That was two things. We made our last payments on the tower truck out here, which amounted to about $39,000, close to $40,000. So that truck is paid for. That's an important thing to note as well. All the apparatus that you saw outside is paid for already. So there's no loans on any of that equipment. It's owned by the department. And then the other $51,000 to make up the rest of that $90,000 is the room that you're sitting in right now. So we recently refinished this. Room was pretty well dated and had a lot of outdated tables, chairs. The projector was barely legible when it was up there, so that was the upgrade to this room for training, meetings, community outreach type activities. So you're sitting in $50,000 worth of that expense. The gray line that you see up there in the top is what we provided to the city. So there was, I think at one of the city council meetings, somebody said, well, this isn't a budget. The numbers that we provided were what the city had asked for, basically to smooth out the expense over those 3 years and provide them with an average expense increasing 3% year over year. So all that is the 3 bars of that year averaged out with a 3% change year over year. And it gives a little better planning capabilities for those expenses. Okay, any questions on capital expenses as it rolled into the budget? Maybe I'll back up one slide. Have a quick look at the total budget. And so those are the numbers that have been shared with the city. Those are the actual numbers. The average numbers were what you saw in the North Scott Press. So a little over $700,000 for 26, $872,000 for 27, and $960,000 for 28.
How is the city's number that they get established? Is there a formula for it? If it's a fixated number, how and when was that figured out to begin with?
Are you asking about the 25 budget or the proposed future budget?
No, what the city funds you guys yearly since 2015.
So at one point, the city had recognized where we were at, and this was before actually my time here at Eldridge Fire, and they brought that up to match the county tax levy rate. So matching the same way what we were getting in the county, the 60 3/4 cents per $1,000 of assessed value. What occurred then is that at one point, again, before my time, they fixed that dollar figure before I became involved in the finances more. They fixed that at $169,000. And I know the treasurer, myself, and assistant chief, we had gone to the city several times to ask to have that increased, and again, they said they had a shortfall, goes in the budget, and that's all they could do. So why that stayed at $169,000, I can't say for sure, but it was there. We had asked to have it increased, and we got no traction.
Yeah, please.
Can you talk a little bit about, like you were mentioning, that some of the engines are going to be needed to be replaced? How do you determine when they need to be replaced, retired, and then kind of what is the expense to replace those?
Sure. Yeah, we do have a slide that talks through expense and how much those rigs cost. As far as replacement schedule, NFPA does dictate the life of a fire engine, and so that's how we kind of roughly gauge how long they're going to last. The other piece of it is hours of operation, number of miles driven, calls they've been on, just general wear and tear. You can kind of start to see as they get worn out, and pump certifications, pump pressure, things like that change over time. That gives you an indication of, is this thing still functioning at its proper level, or do we need to start thinking about replacement? I'll ask Chief to chime in there as well. He does a lot more of the rig replacement planning.
Yeah, so NFPA does take 25 years on a fire apparatus. That doesn't mean that rig has to be replaced at 25 years. What it means is that's their recommendation. There's a big difference in a rig that's running X number of calls in New York City or Chicago versus a rig that's running right here in Eldridge, Iowa. So do we need to replace it at 25 years? That's all dependent upon, like Brian said, is what are we seeing in that truck? As we're having the pumps tested annually, are they seeing that pump is starting to fail? Is there starting to become metal shavings in the gearboxes of that and indicating signs? Also, corrosion, okay? So one of the apparatus out here, we just 2 years ago went through that truck and had a bunch of oxidation, corrosion stuff fixed, as well as mechanical things sent through the dealership where it was originally built. So we have to evaluate, again, when does it start to become more of a liability in repair and maintenance versus we should just get it replaced so we are not kicking that can down the road and jeopardizing potential response or its ability to respond during that call.
Resale value.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, if taxes in Eldridge, they must have gone up in the last 10 years, like everything else, right? So where's that excess money from the tax increase that you didn't receive a penny more for 10 years? I'd like to know that answer. Where's somebody from the council?
That is a great question. We'll have a call to action for you later. I would encourage you to attend the next city council meeting and ask that question. I don't know where all the money has been allocated. I'm obviously not on the city council, I'm not privy to that,
But I mean, our food
It's a
and
valid
everything
question.
has gone up. Surely they would know that your expenses are going up. I mean, it only makes sense.
The 200,000 in capital in future years, is that apparatus, it's been said that it's $1 million or more. Is that a loan, is that to pay down a loan payment? Is that we pool it up for 5 years and then buy a truck, or what does that look like for that 200,000 capital per year?
Yeah, it's probably a little bit of both, right? So we don't exactly know when we're gonna have a major maintenance issue or, something going on with one of our apparatus. So what we're trying to do is plan for that. It's likely a hybrid of that. We want to increase our capital reserves so that when we do need to replace an apparatus, we can do that. Is it gonna be fully funded? Likely not, when you look at the prices of some of these apparatus that we are looking at having to purchase in the near future. So it likely won't be able to be fully funded. We'll end up taking out a loan on maybe a portion of that. That's what happened with Tower. You heard me say we paid off the last payments on that. There was a loan for a portion of that truck that got refurbished. So, yeah, it's a good question there. I do want to go back. You kind of mentioned, okay, so $200,000 a year, what happens, right? What happens if we have excess operating cash? And what happens with these capital funds, right? At the end of the year, we have extra money. Where does it go? It rolls into that future capital fund, right? We don't take it home. We're not a for-profit business, right? We're a nonprofit entity, so we can't spend it. We can't give everybody a bonus. We roll that into the capital expense fund and then plan for, hey, when we do need to replace squad 3, we've got an extra $50,000. It's the same thing that happens when we can offset some of our operating costs or some of this capital expense with grant money. That money can get spent on whatever equipment, if it's turnout gear, if it's new hoses, if it's, whatever the case is, that money that gets offset by those grants then rolls into our capital fund. So there's a chance that could go down in the future. But when you start looking at these new apparatus numbers, and my little asterisk again, right? This is Google AI search based on how much do new fire apparatus cost in Iowa. And it pulls up, hey, Des Moines just ordered a new ladder truck, and Bettendorf just got a new engine. It pulls in those data points. These are the numbers that we're looking at. So a new engine, 800,000 to 1.4 million. A new ladder truck, like you see out there, is in the millions. Okay, so they're significant expenses. That's why we need to start planning for capital expenses in the future. We need to start saving for that.
It's also worth mentioning that the lead time on these trucks is quite long. So, we don't get to order it right when we need it. We have to look ahead and be willing to, make that decision maybe a couple years in advance. And so that's why we really need to start that process right now. So that
And that won't even guarantee your price.
Correct.
I think it's
That's
still
like a new
escalating.
car waiting for.
And if you look at prices over the last 5-6 years, it's significantly changed. And I think a quick Google search will tell you all about that because there's quite a bit of news about it right now. So.
Okay, cash on hand, that's another question that's come up in some of the posts and all that kind of stuff. How much cash does the Eldridge Volunteer Fire Company have on hand right now? Roughly $150,000. So you heard about some of our capital expenses. One of the things that's coming out of our reserves as we speak is a new command vehicle. So the one that we have is getting into pretty high maintenance cost portion of its life, a lot of miles on it, became non-functional for what we needed it, so we've ordered a new truck. That's $90,000 coming out of there. Not coming out of the $150,000. That's already accounted for in this $150,000. $150,000 is the money that we have as our cash on hand right now, and that's for all of our operating expenses. That's for any kind of an emergency fund. So imagine any one of those trucks out there has some kind of an engine issue and it needs to be overhauled. Chief mentioned pump performance. We may need to replace pumps on some of these rigs, those sort of things. Those add up very, very quickly. And we like to have at least $75,000 to account for those emergency requirements. So what you see there is we don't have a lot of cash reserves. That's another reason that we're asking for additional capital, is to start to build up those cash reserves. as we need them.
Brian, you have a question?
Yeah.
How do you guys make any money for this 150,000?
How are we making money?
Yeah, like where's this money come from?
Is it, you're saying, is it invested or?
Is it invested, volunteer? You know, obviously you guys said you don't charge for a call, so is it just through grants?
Yeah, it's a little bit of everything that you just mentioned. So it's the leftover money from our operating budget. What we don't spend that the city, the county, and the Mid-American Gas franchise fee pays into our accounts, it's whatever we haven't spent. And our treasurers do a great job of that, have done a great job of that over the last several years, watching the budget and making sure we're not overspending, making sure that we have this level of reserve always on hand. And the other thing that I'll point out, you know, there's been some discussion about fiscal responsibility and how do we trust you guys with that amount of money. I'll point out that we've been operating on a shoestring budget for the last 10 or 15 years and have, I think, proven to be very responsible with that money. When you look at our operating costs versus what we get paid on an annual basis, the fact that we have $150,000 in reserve is impressive in my mind. I'm biased, of course, right? But, yeah. So that's how we keep the reserves, but we know we're going to need more as we replace aging equipment. So, starting to wrap up because I know nobody wanted to come here and be PowerPointed to death tonight. A few questions to ask yourselves and what we ask ourselves as citizens as well is what's the best for us, right? What's the best for the citizens of Eldridge? What's the best for the benefited fire district? What do we want to see? What do you guys want to see this fire department provide for services in the future? Is it a continuation of everything we've been providing? EMS, rescue, fire, hazmat response? Or is there a change you'd like to see? We'd like to hear that from you, if there's a change. Is there something else that you've seen out there that you think we could provide? Let us know. Do we just maintain our current services? How do we maintain our ability to respond to calls? We've got a plan put together to try and maintain that. Finish the upstairs, bolster our volunteerism, hire full-time resources as needed. That is our plan moving forward. Fiscal responsibility we just talked about. I don't think I'll make any more comments on that. And then supporting future community growth. So we talked about that, right? The city continues to talk about, we want Eldridge to be the place everybody wants to come to. We want businesses to move to town. How do we make sure that we can support that as well? We've got to make sure we can increase volunteerism, increase our support. What's the best long-term strategy for the department? That's something that we talk about a lot internally. How do we keep the members we have? We spend a lot of money on our volunteers, getting them certified, outfitted with gear, you know, building the atmosphere around here. It's a well-oiled machine and a team that works very well with each other. So how do we keep that? How do we recruit new members? What capabilities do we have? And how do we manage our assets? Again, we talked a little bit about that. We have replacement schedules, we've got plans, and that's where the capital needs. So I'm going to pause there and ask for any other questions on the content or anything else you might have seen in the meeting. Please.
You guys as volunteers and retention of volunteers and so on, if you're injured on a call, fire, something drops, whatever, do you have to carry special insurance or are you covered by that?
Sure. Yeah, good question. I might defer that to Tim. He knows a lot more about workers' comp.
Yeah, we're covered. The department provides workers' comp that would cover any injuries, and it's very expensive. Very expensive.
And do you have to have a liability? Let's say you screw up on a job, something happens wrong.
Yes, we have.
A lawsuit.
Yep, absolutely. We have all the normal property insurance, liability insurance, just like any other business would. That's not a cheap bill each year either.
Kind of a dangerous occupation.
That's a good question. That comes out of the salary, benefit, and operating costs that you saw on the graph. Yeah, please.
On that note, where for workers' comp, I know it can be really expensive. Have you guys ever looked at forming a captive insurance group, which I did just read something about independent fire offices do sometimes look at that with other groups?
No. The
It's
short answer
something,
is no.
it's something you might want to ask your insurance people about.
So we've had numerous conversations, and and when it's come up, there's only 2 underwriters that will insure volunteer departments. Now, maybe something's changed since the last conversation, but that could be something that certainly could be explored.
I just know if you can get into it, it really can reduce your prices. If you can get into it.
First of all, great presentation. This is a lot of great content. What percentage of cities in Iowa move from all volunteer, or the size of Eldridge are still all volunteer and not full-time fire departments?
It's hard to put a percentage on it, but one thing that's worth noting is that Eldridge is one of the top responders by call for an all-volunteer department, which isn't necessarily a list that you want to be on top of. It may mean that we're behind the curve here. And I think that's the thing that gives us the most pause when we look statewide and we're 1 or 2 for an all-volunteer department. That's alarming for us, and it's a good point. You know, I think one of the things that we didn't cover robustly necessarily, but I think a lot of you are aware of, is that the majority of what we respond to is EMS, and that is technically what we're most concerned about as being at risk. The city has an obligation to provide fire protection. Now, you know, depending on where things go, that fire protection may end up getting more expensive, but it's guaranteed that it will be provided because it's a necessity. They are not required to provide EMS protection. And, you know, if any of you in this room, you know, hopefully you guys haven't had to utilize the emergency services, but for those of you in this room that have, I guarantee that you could look at your neighbor that hasn't and say how important it is to have it. You know, our partners in Medic, they're absolutely fantastic service. They're as good as they come, but they still have limitations. If they're on a call already in the community, it could take 15, 20 minutes for another rig to get out here. And if we run back-to-back calls all the time. I mean, last Tuesday, I think we had 5 or 6 before noon, you know, and some of those were rapid fire. One of those rigs came from LeClaire. I mean, if that's an unresponsive patient, that's 20 minutes they don't have. That's about 18 minutes they don't have. So I think that's the part that we want to make sure that everyone's really aware of leaving this room, is that's what's at risk, you know? So I think that's one of the things we want to make sure that we cover.
If I could interject there, we are the second busiest volunteer fire department in the state of Iowa, the first busiest per capita of residents in the state of Iowa.
Thank you.
For the residential area upstairs, how many people do you hope to build it for? Because eventually, you know, Eldridge won't be able to stay a volunteer department.
Yeah, good question. I'll let Chief maybe answer that.
So ideally, we'd like to be able to make sure we can comfortably house 4 people at any given time. So it's not a residency program. You wouldn't be like living here on your non-time. You'd be coming here and have a place to stay, sleep if it's overnight as well, but stay. But ideally to have at least 4 people, it'd be the max upstairs that would be able to stay at the station. We would still embrace and try to have all of our volunteers that are still living in their homes right here in town. That's for those people that are a little farther away that wouldn't be able to make the response time directly up here.
And a lot of that number 4 comes from EMS calls, like Andrew alluded to. That's the bulk of our calls, like 80 to 85% in that range. And so 4 people on an EMS call is really ideal for us. So if we've got 4 people in-house that can respond to an EMS call that comes in, if there is a more significant call, a structure fire, motor vehicle incident, things like that, we would rely on the volunteers to come in as well. So everybody would get paged and would be, you know, requested to come to the station as they are able.
I've been doing a lot of research on the different calls that you guys go on, and I had the question that I understand we're backup for Long Grove and Parkview both. I'm all for that. They need the help totally, but is there any compensation that comes back to you from either Long Grove or Parkview, either one?
Yeah, good question. So what you're referring to there is what we call mutual aid agreements, and we have those with our adjacent jurisdictions. And if they're unable to take a call, or if they get back-to-back calls, we will show up for them, and they will do the exact same for us. So if we're unable to take a call, we have 2-3 calls going at the same time, they will show up for us. And as we're saying that, we don't compensate each other back and forth. It's a mutual courtesy that we expect and we give.
And they, you know, when we have a structure fire, Long Grove's there. I mean, without question. Same for us to them, but we've been on structure fires here in town, and they've pulled up 2 or 3 rigs, and they've worked that structure the entire night, same as us. So having that relationship with them, it's a better resource for everybody. And you know, I understand that there's can be some concerns about that, but you know, that enables us to have a wider response, you know, that we wouldn't really be able to have not being in a metro area.
I think one thing that's worth noting on the mutual aid is that we don't just mutual aid respond with other volunteer agencies. We get called to Davenport all the time. We were down on 280 when they had a large field fire. We have apparatus that's more in tune to that than they do. We have water tenders to haul water to rural areas outside on the west side of Davenport. We've assisted Davenport on Interstate 80 with vegetation fires. So it's not just assisting other volunteer agencies, it's assisting all agencies. Our mutual aid agreement covers all the agencies in Scott County as well as some in the Illinois side of the river.
So where does this process go from now? Because it's been kind of a war of the words kind of thing, and it's budget time, I would think. Is there something you need the community to do? I mean, my personal opinion is just having been when they were deciding to close the community center, they had already decided before they had meeting after meeting, and people, 40 people get up to speak against it, and it didn't matter.
Yeah, great question, and that's kind of a great segue into our next slide. We'll come back. We'll come back for more questions. But absolutely, as you alluded to, we're trying to get in front of this. Right? We have been asking for a significant amount of time to try and stay ahead of this. What we need is assistance from the residents here to go to the city council, go to the meeting, email your councilman, reach out to them if you know them in person, and share your opinions, right? Share what you've learned here tonight, share your opinion, whatever that may be, right? Hey, you need to fully fund this department, you need to create your own, and whatever you think. But you've seen the information and the facts that we know and our plan moving forward. So our request is reach out to that group and provide your feedback, make your voice heard. If you want to maintain the level of service, if you want to, you know, continue the department, continue to build assets and capabilities here, please do reach out to the city council. So we don't end up in a situation like the skate park where things close down and then it's too late to recover.
Where are you going to have a meeting with no space?
For the city council?
You bring this many people plus, and then you're going to get gym over the school.
We are hoping that they will relocate the meeting. It's been requested because we do anticipate that there will be a significant number of people there, and we don't want people waiting out in the street, of course. We don't really have any control over where they place it, but we hope that they understand that, you know, the citizens deserve an opportunity to come speak, come let their voice be heard, and I'm hoping that they will relocate Monday's meeting to an appropriate sized venue. I can't say for sure that they're going to be able to, but that's the hope. We did ask. One thing I also want to mention is that, you know, we do actually have a city councilman here tonight, Mr. Brian Dockery. I will say, you don't need to email him. He knows. You know, he's here, and he's been an ardent supporter through this process. Doesn't mean he doesn't ask the hard questions. I think if you've ever watched him at work at City Council, you know he's a bit of a hog. But that's a good thing, you know. And it's. I really respect the fact that he showed up. He's asking the right questions, and he wants to be informed. He wants to know what's going on. So.
Yeah, he was only one of 2 aldermen who supported keeping the community center and skate park open. The rest had their mind already made up.
Well, we have to have fire.
I do have one observation. Has anybody seen the news here?
Yes.
Yeah.
Aaron is here.
Yeah.
It's right there.
Oh, okay. I mean, at least we got somebody, you know.
It's been a little one-sided, hasn't it?
with EMS calls, then you said those are roughly 80 to 85% of your calls. Can you explain the relationship you guys have with the medic station as well then, and how you guys interact there, and when there is a call, who's leading that call, I guess then? Is it the first one's there and?
Medic. Yeah, great question. So the question is, when we get a dispatch for an EMS call, who's in charge? How do we work with medics? All those things. The answer is we both get dispatched at the same time. So medic gets dispatched, our department gets dispatched, people show up, we field our EMS truck, which is a small one that's out there. And whoever's in charge, or who's in charge on that call initially, is whoever gets there first. So if we get there first, like Andrew mentioned, back-to-back calls, things like that, if the rig's coming out of LeClaire or somewhere else, oftentimes we do get there first. We will start patient care. We have a wide variety of care levels on the department. So we have anywhere from EMR, emergency medical responders, to EMTs, to critical care paramedics. So we try and staff the truck with the highest level of care possible for those calls. And if we get on scene, we will start doing patient care. We will do everything we can within our BLS, basic life support, scope of practice until medic gets there. At that point, we will give a patient care report. They will take over patient care, and then they will do the transport. We do not do transport through our agency, but we will start patient care. Medic will also administer medications and things like that when they get on scene.
It's also important to understand when we go on those calls for the medical, we have, for our trucks to roll, we have to have at least an EMR on the truck. So we have to have medical support on there. When we go on that call, we may have one of our firefighters join medic, or two of them going in to the hospital to provide that care. And I work on medic as well as the fire department. There's times there's no way for one person in the back of that ambulance to provide the care that that patient needs. He may have 2 or 3 people doing different functions on them depending on the severity of the call that allows us to get into the hospital. Because you're talking, in Eldridge even, you're talking 10 to 15 minutes to get to the hospital. They're providing the care that that person is going to be able to stay alive. Our fire department assists medic with that regardless of the call.
And you made a key point, Pat. You said we won't roll without a medical person on the truck. So of our 20 members, 19 of us are certified medical responders in some fashion. EMR, EMT,
Another thing to point out though with the response, our response to that is we have a critical call come in, an unresponsive person, something major, let's go down that path, okay? We don't like our members to go directly to a scene, but if we hear that unresponsive person, whatever it may be, every member here lives in the community we serve. And it's not unnoticed or unneeded that if we know we're gonna drive by that house on the way here and someone is unresponsive, or we're being advised that CPR has already been started by bystanders or family members, we will stop there. So having our volunteers scattered in this community several times within this year alone, not to mention the years we've served this community, is that we've had one of our members stop there and start that CPR, start that saving effort long before a fire truck made it out of the fire station or an ambulance made it out of the station. So we get paged out. We had a cardiac incident here in town that we had someone on scene doing chest compressions within 2 minutes of them calling 911. So that's a pretty good response time when we can do that coming out of our own homes, going to those nearby neighbors.
And Brian, I'd like to point out, if for some reason that this department ends up being a city department, instead of you guys keeping it independently, one of the arguments that they have been talking about is that they are thinking about possibly getting rid of the EMS and doing fire only, and you alluded to that a little bit. And it kind of goes back to what we're talking about right here. If you have a loved one that's having a heart attack, that's having a stroke, was in a car accident, and there is no medical except for medic, and there is a medic here in Eldridge, but half the time they're in Davenport staging for Davenport calls because they're so busy in Davenport. So, we're putting our community, if we go that route, at a real disservice. There's going to be a lot of deaths or a lot of really bad outcomes coming because of no EMS.
Why would you get?
So,
Delayed care.
what's that?
I say delayed care.
Very much delayed care. So,
Yeah.
so that's something else that's really important to keep in mind here too. I mean, we're at a real risk of losing medical assistance within our community if the city would take over, because that is one of the arguments that they're, talking about, getting rid of EMS, so.
That was kind of one of the deciding factors for us to change,
Yes.
because we've been very quiet throughout this entire process, trying to just keep the peace, keep our heads down, do our job, do what we're here to do. But it got to a point where that risk, sort of risk benefit, got outweighed. We all live here, we have families here. We don't want to lose our EMS protection. I got a couple silly kids, they do dumb stuff all the time. I want to make sure that they're covered. I've got, nieces, nephews, brothers, sisters,
Yes, and I'd like to point out too, not to interrupt you, but my family personally has benefited from that. If it weren't for you guys and for medic and EMS people being here in town, my mom would not be here. She flatlined. And so if there was not somebody there to administer meds, she would have been gone about 4 or 5 years ago. So, it personally, for me, it's important that we keep it with EMS.
We agree.
I know you.
So I live on the outskirts of town here, and my husband's a regular. I'm sorry, but he is.
You don't live on the outskirts, now you live way out.
And I live, way out there, and it takes these guys, I'm not kidding you, no more than 7 minutes. From the time I call to the time they get there, it's 7 minutes. And it's a group of them, they come and hold my hand. Right, guys?
Not anymore.
I know, but I love
I
it.
retired.
So just, I think that's a very important issue. It needs to be put out to the community. I live out there, I didn't even know anything that was going on because I'm not in the city that much. So his letter that went out, the chief's letter, was why I'm here today. So by you telling us that, that's important too, because I don't know what I would have done without the EMS and the fire department. It takes the fire department to help get them out of the house, so.
And the fact that they do this on a volunteer basis.
And they're
And
fantastic.
a lot of times, absolutely no respect, which is very disheartening. So these guys put in so many hours, night and day. I'm married to the old guy here. He's like, "Yay, old guy, yay." And I will tell you, there are many, many, many nights where he is coming and going 3 and 4 times in the middle of the night. It's gotten to the point where if he goes on a call, he knows, don't come back to bed, go sleep in the other room because I only get woke up 4 times. So, it's a revolving door. And he's constantly going, and you guys put in so much work, and I'm just so sorry that you're going through all this.
The point was made about the letter being received. Did anybody not receive a letter in the mail? If you could raise your hand, our volunteers have the letter, extra ones back here, that we can share those with you. It's a good letter. Someone does. Give them 1 second to grab them on the counter out there.
Yeah, questions, go ahead.
Do you have any plans to get more organized with getting citizen and community support and knowing what, and identifying, so helping the city realize what residents want? On that survey they sent out and they asked questions about the various departments and they included fire department, like, is this a high priority for you or whatever? That was my #1 priority on that survey.
Yeah, this is one of our main avenues. You saw what we call the social media blitz. So we put that out there to try and garner some additional support. My hope is that Mr. Dockery will continue to take your feedback and what he's learned in this meeting here back to the council. And I would encourage you to reach out to them. That's the best avenue, is much like the community center. I don't know if everyone on the council realized that was that big of a deal or big of an issue and people were so passionate about it until after it was closed and everybody showed up, right? So we've got to show up.
And who knows, maybe the press will put it on their website.
Yeah.
But with regard to that issue, if it weren't for, I don't know if it's trustee or council member Dockery and Councilman Blackwell, it would not have been they stayed open several months longer than they planned to because of those two who listened to what the people wanted. So I appreciate that.
Any more comments on the?
I mean, as far as organizing, again, we are volunteers, we're trying our best. I mean, that's what the mailer was about, because, I mean, I think half of our department doesn't use Facebook, including our chief and assistant chief, so we're not relying on Facebook to be our only means. That's why we wanted to try to get that mailer out there, so we can just get it into every mailbox, you know, to the best of our ability. We are really encouraging people to attend that meeting and make their voices heard on a repeated basis. You know, send them an email, not Dockery. Send them an email, you know, go to the city council meeting. We can only do so much, and we've been having this conversation for at least 5 years. I mean, really aggressively in negotiation for the last 14 months with not much headway being made despite our best efforts. And I think ultimately, most of the people that live in this community, they want the same thing. They just might have different ideas on how to get there, but we're really trying to encourage people to go and make their voice heard.
Well, not everybody's on Facebook, but I think you have to have a consistent way to get your information out to the people. A good way to do that is through a blog, if you need help with that. You have done that before, but you've got to keep at it.
We do have our website too. We post a lot of this communication on there. Obviously, getting people to go to the website.
Yeah, you can get people, to sign up. Yeah.
So I'd love to talk to you after the meeting.
Yeah.
And here's some ideas for sure.
Yeah, I'm not in Eldridge, I'm your county people. We can't go that meeting though, can we, because it's for Eldridge? We can go?
You can go to any public meeting.
Okay, that's what I was wondering, okay.
I don't know how this is gonna sound, but we have got to respect the effort that you guys give constantly to help us and go through this. This playing words and shouting at each other and back and forth, that's not Eldridge. You guys are volunteers and you're doing a great job. Nan and I sat out right in front of our house a couple years ago, scared to death we had a gas leak in the house. And within minutes, you guys were there and the garage doors were open. We were sitting out there with our doggy, worried about what was going on. And 3 of you walked in there and went downstairs into our basement and got it fixed. I mean, I can't respect anybody any more than that. And it just means the world. And I hate to see the press putting these things in there about this disrespectful. I'm so glad my local representative, Brian, is here. He had the balls to come in here and at least listen to the other side. And it upsets me when we can't give that kind of respect to each other. Enough said.
Based on the temperature in here, I think we need to add air conditioning to our capital. You have another question?
Yeah, can you get, in comparison, the number of calls that you guys are at this point for this year compared to what you were last year? The numbers?
Yeah, I'm gonna defer that to Dave. Dave's our numbers guy.
We're almost exactly about the same. We're just shy of 400 right now.
Oh.
395. 395. So last year we ran 788, and we're right on pace for that same amount.
And Dave, tell them how many you've been on.
You're 95.
I can probably tell you, it's over 320.
Just for comparison, I talked to Leclerc today, they're right at 300. So we're pretty much where we've been the last couple of years. We're about at overall yearly, we're about 200 ahead of where they are. And that's budget-wise, it puts it in perspective.
And to be clear, they run a very, very great department and are very fiscally sound.
Yeah,
And they're being funded.
they're our model. That's what we've been looking at.
They're being funded to an appropriate level. We're playing a little bit of catch up here. I mean, I think it was mentioned a couple times that locked in rate, you know, a lot of these capital discussions that we're having, had we been funded incrementally over the last 10, 11, 12 years at the rate of increase, you know, alongside the, you know, increasing property value, which I know you guys have seen a lot of that in the referendum discussions, we may not be having some of those capital discussions that we're having today because of that deficit. So we are playing a little bit of catch up here as well, and that's something to kind of keep contextually in mind as well.
Yeah, there's a question in the back.
Just to maybe essentially add to your guys' financial transparency.
transparency. In regards to the upstairs renovation, would you guys potentially utilize a fire pole, or would you be running down the stairs to respond to calls?
I like that. It's a good question. It's a good point. We have talked about a pole. We're just not sure where we'd put it if we put it. We gotta figure it out. Good question. All right, what other questions do you have?
I live right next door, and I see all the time people here, you know, on their own doing extra beyond what they're required to do. But Keith's out here all the time, working on equipment, fixing stuff. He's a mechanic and an expert mechanic. No telling how much money he has saved this department just in mechanic costs. And he's here all the time. I live right next door and I see him all the time. I walk by. This guy is dedicated. He's not what the paper portrays him to be, pissing me off.
Very well said.
On top of all his other duties already.
Absolutely. We feel the same way at the department. You've got unwavering support for Chief Schneckloth. Yeah, please.
Back to your call volume earlier and what you normally anticipate over a calendar year. And then with the size of Eldridge and growing and retention of volunteers being super important, what is the number of volunteers you currently have, but what would you expect for, or like to see for a town this size and based on the call volume?
Sure. Yeah, so I can speak to the number of volunteers we have today. We have on the department right now 20 active members and 6 explorers. So the Fire Explorer program is a program through the Boy Scouts where high school students can join us, go on some calls, participate in trainings, start to learn the trade if they're interested in. So we have 20 active members and 6 explorers. I'll let Chief comment on targets. I know he spent a lot of time trying to put that together and you know, get a target of where we'd like to be for the city.
So if we, ideally, I feel the department, if we could have somewhere in the ballpark of 30 volunteers, and then as we look at the paid staff, that would be additional. So, you know, in the first year here, if we could have 30 volunteers and 1 paid staff to oversee and manage that flow, that'd be ideal. I think we can sustain our city growth for at least 5 to 7 years with that number of people here. So, if you'd like an application, I'd be more than happy to run it down for you.
That said, you know, we did sit down with Chief Leaker and LeClaire, and Brian alluded to it earlier, but I mean, building quarters made a huge impact, and I'm on the recruitment committee, and I can tell you, we've had to shoot down, I think over the last year alone, 4 or 5 very qualified people who are fully firefighter 1 and firefighter 2, all the way up on their medical side to either EMT or paramedic. They've got their hazmat, they want to volunteer. We don't have any way to bring them into the ecosystem because living in Davenport, even if they're just on the other side of Amazon, they're not going to make the truck. And that's ultimately what we need. We need bodies on trucks. And so, I mean, I can say that towards that end, towards that goal, we haven't even made a recruitment effort in those areas. Those are folks that have just come to us organically and reached out and said, hey, we had one today. You know, hey, we want to volunteer, we want to be involved. We're trying to build the vehicle to allow that to happen so that we can continue to operate as a partial department for as long as possible. That's really ultimately our goal because we're also taxpayers in this city, and we want it to be run as efficiently as possible, and we like what we do. We want to be able to continue to do it.
So earlier in the year, the legislature in its wisdom thought we might have to have a county fire department. And didn't the city council drag that around for a little bit to delay what they were doing? Has that gone away? I hope.
So what I can speak of that is that it was brought up earlier that one of the things that we did need, that they used a reflection that we needed to wait and see what that brought out. What you're referring to is a countywide fire study. It was a bill that was brought forth by Senator Webster out of Bettendorf, and it was to do a study of larger counties and having consolidated county fire response. I can tell you that that report was published today. I received a copy of it through our representatives in Scott County. So the mayor of Donahue was on there as the small town mayor, and then our emergency manager from Brian Bain was on there as well as for representative emergency management in Iowa. So that report came out today. I have not had a chance to go through it yet. It's about 28 pages. But I'm definitely looking forward to reading through that and seeing what their consensus and recommendation was. But the one thing that we brought back right away when that was brought up is that that was a study bill. Okay, so it was a study, they're gonna do the study. It was no intended action to be taken out of it. It was to get a baseline as to how that might function. I know one of the things behind it that was really concerning was the fact that in some of our larger counties, Polk County specific, there was issues with metropolitan fire departments wouldn't literally cross the street to assist a rural department on a structure fire. Okay, so it was boundary issues, so on and so forth. I get it. That's where it comes back to repeating our mutual aid agreements. We have mutual aid agreements in Scott County that was wrote by the Bi-State Regional Commission back in 2018 that includes all Scott County departments and some on the Illinois side. We will always cross boundaries. You may remember many years ago, we go farther than that. We went to Macoka. Okay, it was a cold damn night outside morning, I'll tell you that much. We took an aerial truck there from Macoka. Okay, so we'll go where we need to go. We were over to Kelowna when the truck shop over there caught fire. We took a water tender over there to them. So fire departments have to have each other back. Volunteers make up 70% of the volunteers. Our volunteer departments make up 70% of the fire responses in Iowa. And that being said, if we didn't have those, we would be in a big world of hurt, especially for those of you that are from our rural areas here. So if it was just strictly a metropolitan department in any of these areas, it would be very detrimental.
You mentioned earlier that to finish the upstairs that would be for additional volunteers to have a place to stay. You said something about the cost was like $50,000 or something.
It's more than that.
More than that?
So we don't have a official estimate. I think we've gotten a few unofficial estimates. We are working on, Chief is working on getting us an estimate, an official estimate for upstairs. But maybe you can comment, Keith, on estimates.
Have you considered doing a community fundraising campaign to raise money for that and get that done as soon as possible without touching your reserves or anything else?
We haven't pursued a community fundraising event for that. So one thing we had started to do is I actually reached out to a couple different contractors to come in and give us some ballpark numbers for the major items upstairs. The plumbing, the electrical, the drywall, and finishing, okay? We got those numbers. It's been a couple years ago now. But what we then turned around and did is we actually inquired with the Student Build Home program. Would it be something they would consider coming in here and doing? We were told, unfortunately, that they are planned out for like the next 3 or 4 years with the home and layouts and stuff like that. So it was not something they would be able to take on. But we have tried to think of different means and ways to either fund and or add that into the project plan to make sure we can make it happen. We, again, with this going on the last 14 months, we haven't focused a lot of time on additional station stuff, but it's definitely, it was just discussed in our last business meeting that we were gonna get a contractor to come in and give us a hard number as to what that's gonna cost, so we know and we can exactly portray what's gonna cost to do that and make that happen.
Yeah. Have you guys done like a feasible study? Is this fire department adequate size for how many years?
The fire station itself?
Yes.
So we haven't done any official studies. That's not something we can go out. But going off of with our ISO review and our location and the growth expansion in the layout plan, we are covered for now. Okay? I don't know how long that will be covered for. Depends upon the growth and which directions we go. So again, it came back to when we talked about the ISO, it's about the distance from the fire station to the different entities.
I asked that because Andalusia just built a new fire station. I don't know the number right off the top of my head, but I'm gonna say it's probably 30 to 35 million.
Yep.
For the fire.
Yep.
So,
Maybe ballpark the upstairs, it will be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars range for everything that's up there. That's a ballpark. So please don't quote me on that, but.
And I guess the one thing about the upstairs, just so everybody knows, is that the upstairs became, as we were thinking as to the future of the growth with the Eldridge Fire Department and the city of Eldridge, as to our roof, it was a flat top roof of the station, it was beginning to fail, and we decided at the time that it was worth the investment for us to go and put on the pitched roof to make that additional space up there versus just replacing that flat roof. We were thinking of the growth and the expansion of this community and the needs of this department to serve for even longer. That's why it's up there. It is studded, it's just studded out walls. We do have a small office area we built upstairs. It has a small window unit, air conditioner style in it, and heated. And that's where our treasurer, our secretary and stuff have their ability to put their stuff and spread out to make sure that they can do all the business side of Eldridge Fire in a controlled area.
Yeah. Interesting to see in 23, the number of growth of businesses and households compared to what your department has done to keep up and support. I think that would be show more what you need to have to cover.
Yeah, so the question, the statement was, can we look back to 23, 24, 25 and the growth of businesses and homes in Eldridge? What's the growth rate of that, and what is the growth rate of the department, and how do we need to build out and improve our capabilities to support future growth? So yeah, great question. I don't have all that information right now, but to your point, something we can dig up. Okay, I know there's a few folks that are kind of peeling out of here in the interest of your time and sensitivity of that. I think we can break for the evening. Again, the call to action or request from us is reach out to your city administration, let them know your thoughts. And we have a plan, and we need the budget to execute that.
Well, Chief, had a well-attended meeting this evening here at the firehouse. What are your thoughts?
I was very appreciative to see the number of people that did turn out for our event, for help explain to the community as to where we're at, what we're asking for, and why we're asking for those specific things.
There were some members of the community that seemed pretty upset with press and social media on things that you tried to clear up in the letter. Your thoughts on that?
The information is put out by whoever within the city, within the fire department. We can only control the fire department side. Again, we want to be very transparent. I want to be very transparent about what's occurred, what's going on, and what we're trying to do, where we're going from there. So if I can ever answer any questions of anybody, I'm always happy to answer those questions. I don't want anything to be felt like there's anything being hidden or secretive of our department or myself serving in this capacity.
And what's the best way for someone to get a hold of you?
I can be reached by phone. My number is very public out there. And or I can be reached at my email address, which is kschneckloth@eldridgefire.com.
Okay, say that one more time a little slower for our folks that are just listening. I've got it up on the screen, but I do have folks that just listen.
It is Schneckloth, KSCHNECKLOTH @eldridgefire.com.
Very good, sir. As I told you in a pre-interview, we kind of talked a little bit beforehand, and we never recorded anything. I said, if questions come up, me being a citizen of Eldridge, and someone doesn't ask them in the public, I would ask. But the public did a good job tonight, I think.
Yeah, I was very pleased with the amount of questions. We've always been very open to, we want to hear your thoughts either for, or maybe you think we're doing something not correct. Maybe we want to see us do something different, and we want to hear both sides of it. It's ultimately important to make sure the citizens get to voice their opinion of what's going on. And then we ask the citizens to go back and voice their opinions to the council so they can understand exactly what everybody in this community that has elected them to be the elected officials, what the citizens want.
Well, we're at around 7,000 residents of Eldridge right now, and the economy's booming. There's going to be somebody that will hate me saying that, because I always get someone that doesn't like it when I say good news. But the economy's booming, and if the town continues to grow, this is definitely an important part of that growth.
It's important because to us, it's important from the fact that we provide a service, and we want that service to be to that level that the citizens and the community members expect. And if we're not providing that service, we want to hear about it. But we also are doing our due diligence in planning, and we're presenting that plan in writing, in paper, and through our budget requests as to how we can execute that to ensure that that service is provided for all the citizens, even the new ones coming in and as it grows.
Well, here we are. It's Wednesday, July 1st, 2026. Monday, July 6th. Just what, 5 days away.
Yeah.
City council meeting. Do you think we will get all these folks that filled these chairs and are still here now to be there?
Yeah, I can only ask that of them. If they, I feel blessed and appreciated that they came here tonight to hear. We put an open call out for a cry for assistance to listen. We wanted to come hear what was going on, where we were at, and what we wanted to do, and how we wanted to move forward. And I hope that they took, our message, and they can go home, process it, and maybe voice their opinion at that council meeting on July 6th.
And what time is that council meeting again?
I believe it starts at 7 p.m.
Okay, get there early, folks. It's always a goal of mine to bring my audience podcast excellence. I've done it tonight. You've added 4 minutes and 5 seconds to that, sir. Thank you. Thanks to all the gentlemen and the ladies involved in the department here in Eldridge. And we wish you the best.
We appreciate it. We're honored to serve this community as well as you being a citizen of our town.
Well, there you have it, folks. The Eldridge Fire Department laid it all out on the line. They explained what they're dealing with. They explained that if the citizens of Eldridge have certain expectations with their fire department, EMS, this is how they see it needs to be done. City council meeting is coming up on Monday night, July 6th. So if you're an Eldridge citizen or Scott County citizen and you're affected by this, you might want to go and let the folks know whether you're for more funding or against or whatever. That's what being an American is all about. And that's also why we bring this stuff to you. Freedom of speech. I show it to you. And remember, truth equals freedom. Do me a favor, give this episode a like. Make sure to follow and subscribe. It is free. Thanks for watching. And I need to thank my sponsors, and they are Griner Auto Body, Car Doctor, McDonald Boneyard, Your Choice Family Restaurant, Girling Repair, B&B Propane, and the family of Jet Stops. Sorry, I stumbled on my words. B&B Propane and the family of Jet Stops. CW Tree Trimming LLC and Iowa Technology Systems. I'm your host, John Bain. Stay friendly, Southeast Iowa.